Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and this video will be a project wrap-up video for this 1/6 scale fully radio-controlled Vantex M4A3 Sherman tank. This was the same model that I reviewed a few months ago as an out-of-the-box review. If you are seeing this vehicle for the first time, this vehicle is from the Chinese manufacturer Vantex, also known as Fuyang. These models are all made out of fiberglass, cloth, and resin, and come fully radio controlled. They also come pretty much for the most part pre-built. However, a lot of the components that you see on the vehicles are very basic. At quick glance, you will see that the model looks much different than it did originally. This, by the most part, is because almost every single one of the molded in and kit supply details have been replaced with resin and metal components from EastCoastArmory.com, Panzerworks, and Armor Packs. The model's original paint job was also replaced with a shade of olive drab and markings from myself. Let me just quickly walk you around the vehicle to show you all different angles of what was done. Okay, to start with the tank's upper hull, I first replaced the way the upper hull mounts to the lower hull. If you watch the original review, the upper hull and lower hull were two separate pieces. The way they were mounted to each other were via these two brass locking bolts in the front and one locking bolt in the rear. This locking arrangement was changed to make the tank more detail friendly. I also had to modify the transmission rivet strip here. On the original kit, the rivet strip is actually molded into the upper hull. Because of this, when you bolt the upper hull and the lower hull together, you get this ugly seam right over here that is below the rivet strip. Now on the real M4 Shermans, the rivet strip was actually casted into the transmission housing. So what I had to do was, in a nutshell, I removed the rivet strip from the molded in upper hull, mounted it to the lower hull, and modified the locking system so that these two bolts actually hold in the upper hull via two aluminum bars that come down into the transmission rivet strip. On the tank's rear, the way I made the rear deck secured to the lower hull was I relocated the positioning of the bolt. Rather over here being in the way of the sledgehammer, I repositioned it to underneath these gas cap covers here. On the real Sherman, these would be the covers for the fuel caps. If I pull the pin and lift the fuel cap cover, you will see an armored fuel cap right there on it. And this here is made out of turned aluminum. This is actually the locking nut. If I turn this, this is attached to the bolt, which secures the upper hull to the lower hull. Every one of my fuel caps function. If I pull the pin, each one of them will have the fuel cap detail underneath. However, these two are the only ones that actually have the bolts on them that hold the upper deck on. One very important modification that I made to the lower hull was the addition of the tank sponsons. Previously, if I was to do this with the camera, you would see clean through to the other side of the vehicle. To build up the sponson, I had to first build up part of the lower hull here, and then build up the top part of the sponson. The significance of the sponson, besides detail, is that it keeps dirt and debris from flying onto the inside of the vehicle. In addition to rebuilding the tank sponson, I also had to rebuild this area here of the lower hull. Previously, this area here, if you look at the original review video, is missing because this is where, in the factory, they had to cut out a portion of the lower hull to fit in the gearbox. The hull actually has the piece molded in of the final drive, but again was removed at the factory. The piece that you see here was all scratch built and fabricated out of plastic and metal. With the piece now added, you see the final drive detailing, and it makes for a nice seamless look on the vehicle. We can also see here added fasteners along the side of the hull and along the top here of the final drive. On the real vehicle, these fasteners is what actually mounts the transmission cover to the tank's lower hull. Another very important piece of detailing that was made to the tank was the modification upgrade of the tank's VVSS spring suspension. If you look in the original review for this vehicle, you'll see that the tank comes with a basic detailed set of functional VVSS suspension system. The suspension here has been modified detail-wise and is still fully functional. If you look at the original video, you will see that there is a large RC car shock absorber that mounts on each side of the bogie. This spring is very durable and does perform well, but lacks in detail integrity. To fix this, I developed a detail cover that slips on over the spring that covers it up. However, still keeps the functionality of the spring intact. But if you look at it, you will see that it looks like the type of spring that you would see on a real Sherman tank. Another very important detail modification that was made to the suspension was the modification of the skid rail. On the kit, the skid rail is like a closed loop that is all made out of CNC'd aluminum. On the real Sherman, the piece is not one continuous loop. So to modify the part, I amputate out the center portion. When you remove the center portion, you will see that there will be a hole on the top portion of the bogie. The top hole had to have been plated over, and detail fasteners were added in its place. Over here, we can see the two cover caps that on the real Sherman would be for tightening up the springs in the suspension so you could service the bogie unit. Moving on here, we can see the idler system, or the return roller system, has also been heavily modified and has been improved detail-wise. Here we can see the Zerk fittings, painted in red, as well as the bearing ring. Another addition that was made to the bogies was the addition of casting numbers and rough cast texture. This is superficial detailing, but does help a lot with the model's appearance. On the model swing arms, we will also see the addition of actual fastener detail. On the swing arm here, these two bolts, these bolt heads that are in the wrench slits, are two CNC'd metal nubs. These nubs were replaced and real fastener details were added. On the road wheels, you can see two Zerk fittings were also added. A lot of these components that you see here, including the Zerk fittings and the spring cover system, are offered on EastCoastArmory.com. For the tank's main return roller, you will see that the addition of the Zerk fittings have been added, as well as their Zerk fitting wells. For these wells to have been added, they had to have been milled into the surface of the solid aluminum road wheel. On the rear portion of the tank's idler mount, you will see that the piece has been reworked to give it a more accurate appearance. What you see here is a resin facade and is primarily just a detail component. If this piece is made to be removed, if necessary, so that I could adjust the tank's track tension. Once complete, I then temporarily remount the part with silicone glue that is able to hold it when I need it to, but it's not permanent enough to break when I need to remove it in case I have to do maintenance on the tank. Next, you will see the tank's tow hitch. The tank has a functional resin tow hitch, and it's canted sideways so that when the tank is driving around, it doesn't get knocked over if it ever hits any brushes or any other obstacles. Many tanks have had this feature on this exact same tow hitch. For the tank's exhaust, the original kit exhausts were replaced with a set of my resin versions. These ones that you see here have been hollowed out so that I have smoke throttle control. There is the tank's rear engine hatch. This piece was not included with the kit and had to have been fabricated. Over here is the tank's metal exhaust reflector grill. This grill operates just like the original one. This here is a handle that actually pivots out, and I can actually fold up the grill if I need to get access to the tank's engine, just like on the real vehicle. The grill has full swinging function and does retract into the portion here of the upper hull. Moving up, we'll see the tank's upper rear deck detailing. These here are VVSS track racks. This here is the folding rear storage rack, complete with gun cleaning kit. On the track racks, they are fully functional. If I twist off these little wing nuts and open this, I will be able to remove the spare track links. And they go back on as easily as they came off. On the rear storage rack, the rack is fabricated entirely out of sheet metal, fully folds like the real vehicle. There's your engine starter crank. These two wing nuts here actually would actually hold the rear rack in the down position and keeps it from flopping around. On this gun cleaning kit here, it's made out of real wood and metal components, and actually telescopes and screws together so I could clean the main gun. This here is functional. If I take off this wing nut, it opens up so I could remove the cleaning rods. On the lower portion here, you will see the exhaust conduit for the Little Joe auxiliary generator. This, on this vehicle, actually functions and smoke is emitted from the tube. Moving on to the upper hull, you will see the engine grill. Now, the engine grill that originally came with the vehicle was all made out of type of styrene and was very light and flopped around a little bit. I removed the inner portions of the screen, replacing them with soldered brass. I also made the air intake out of metal, and it's all soldered together. As you can see, the grills have their three-dimensional appearance, which is accurate, and have a more significant weight to them, keeping them down onto the vehicle as you just seen. The tools are all made out of resin and wood and some metal components. All the chains have been added to their appropriate locations. And the tail lights are also full functional and have been completed. This tail light here has the red lens, while this one here is blacked out. These do function, and there's no light that escapes from the clear resin end cap that has been painted over. This here is the tank's MP48 spring antenna base. This base actually serves two functions. One as a detail component, the second as the tank's actual radio control antenna. This antenna here is actually connected to a wire that is then plugged into the receiver. The antenna is full functional and pivots like the real one.